Hello and welcome to Growing Tech Fast, the condensed Org3D podcast where we talk about growing tech startups with those who have grown them. Today, I'm very happy to be joined by Ben Jenkins, who is the Director of Cybersecurity for Threatlocker. Ben, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Fantastic. For the benefit of our listeners, Ben, perhaps we should kick off with you telling us a little bit about who you are, what your role is with Threatlocker, and what you currently get up to on a day-to-day basis there.
Yeah, of course. So, hi guys, my name is Ben Jenkins. I am our Director of Cybersecurity here at Threatlocker. Essentially, I guess the easiest way to describe what I do is understand threats that are going on, maybe do technical demonstrations of them, find out the inner workings of how this is working, and then educate users out there, whether they be users of Threatlocker or even non-users of Threatlocker, educate people on the threats that are out there in the world so that we can try as a community, as an IT community, to be as protected as possible.
Fantastic. I guess I would like to circle back off that, Ben, because you've had a really interesting journey in your career from what I've seen on your LinkedIn profile. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey? What are some of the key things that you've learned that has led you to your role at Threatlocker today?
Yeah, of course. So I guess I started off originally as an IT administrator, a sysadmin at a secondary school in the UK, which was, for me, a huge learning experience. And anyone who wants to get into IT, that is the number one thing I recommend, is definitely go down that apprenticeship route. And if you can go to a school, it teaches you how to essentially fix things with hope, sticky tape, and just a little bit of luck, because they have no budget for anything. So that was really interesting from my standpoint, and really helpful because we ran everything internally. So that gave me a really solid technical background there. From there, I worked at an MSP for a while as well. That was also really great, getting to support a multitude of businesses. I've worked at another vendor called Datto, quite a large vendor out there. I joined when they were quite small, and then grew over about 6 years over here in the EMEA region. And then since then, I've been here at Threatlocker, and absolutely loving it. One of my main goals here is I want to try and grow Threatlocker as much as is possible.
Yeah. Awesome. That's fantastic. So obviously Threatlocker, I've seen incredible things about this organization. It certainly has got a lot of scope to grow right now, which is very, very exciting. These are the type of companies that us at Org3D, like to be partnered with in some way, shape or form. So as a product or solution, can you tell us about Threatlocker and why it's unique as a offering on the market in cybersecurity today?
Yeah, sure. So Threatlocker is essentially a zero trust endpoint security company. What we do is we enable you to have that peace of mind at night that hopefully there isn't any malware running on your machine, or there isn't anything nefarious that's happening. Frequently when we look at security, we rely on AVs, EDRs, MDRs, anti-spam and the like. But being very realistic, there are still attacks that are happening. We still have zero-day exploits. We still have application vulnerabilities going on. We still have these threats able to get through these solutions that we have implemented. And this is really where that term I used earlier, that zero trust, comes in. The idea of zero trust is essentially, in its simplest form, least privilege. It's providing least privilege to users, to applications, to network devices, to anything, theoretically. And that is exactly what we are offering, because if I can give you least trust, you can cause the least amount of damage, if any damage at all. So we essentially do that through 5 key components. Our newest is NAC, Network Access Control, which is a firewall-like tool. It's currently out in beta, which is really, really cool. We have application whitelisting. Essentially only allow, it goes by a few different names. It's app whitelisting, there's allow listing, there's deny by default. They all essentially mean the same thing. If you hear that name, they're all kind of one and the same. Essentially what it means is you're only allowed to use or run individual executables, or run certain files that can execute based on their hash. So only those files are allowed to execute. Everything else gets denied by default, which is where you kind of get that name there. You then have ring fencing, which is kind of an extension to that solution, saying, hey, this application can run, but it's not allowed to access X, Y, and Z. So a really cool scenario here is PowerShell by default can access all of your files, and it can also access the internet. So I have a script that I run during any demonstrations, or if someone's really, really confident that their security is top notch, I'll say, okay, go ahead and run this script. And what it'll do is it will use PowerShell, take a copy of their documents and upload into some Google Blob storage I've got. Now, I'm not aware of a security tool realistically that's going to go ahead and stop that, because what is bad? Nothing. You know, we have a trusted app, PowerShell, accessing my data and sending it to the cloud. But you and I can sit here today, Lionel, and we can go, that's a terrible idea. That should never, ever be run on a machine, right? Like, I don't need people being able to steal my data in that way. Yeah. So using our ring fencing solution, we can say apps can run, but it can't access the internet, or it can't access certain files and folders. We then have elevation control, which is take away local admin rights from users, but allow them to run individual applications as a administrator, which is pretty handy. And then finally, we've got our storage control, and that's essentially USB blocking, but also limiting what applications can access what files and folders on your local network. So even going down to network shares or sync folder locations. You know, if we think about one of the first things ransomware does when it gets on a network is it looks for any NFS, CIFS, SMB shares. It looks for sync folders, and it also looks for backup locations. Well, if I can lock down those locations and say only these specific executables can access it, ransomware can no longer access that data and overwrite my data. Wow. So that right there is probably a quick, I think that's about 3 minutes or so, but that was a quick run through on what it is that Threatlocker is able to offer.
That was perfect. You know, that's a perfect description there. You know, it's really, really informative, and it's really important, to obviously give us a breakdown of Threatlocker. It sounds like you're very, very passionate about this product, Ben, which is very, very, very exciting for me. But I suppose, your journey took you to Threatlocker. Besides, obviously, the product, which I'm sure was part of the decision you made to join the company. What was it about the culture that Threatlocker instilled in its employees, in its growth journey, that enticed you inevitably to be part of the organization?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, it's probably, to answer that question, it's best to look back. I joined Datto in the UK when we were at 30 employees. Now, globally, I think I was the 445th or something along those lines, 446, somewhere around there. So globally, we would still have that kind of small mindset at Datto, but especially in EMEA, we had that really, really small mindset. There was 30 of us. Yeah. And I loved that. And seeing us grow from that to about 2,500 or so, when I actually ended up leaving, I knew at that point where it was that I really, really liked. And it was working at essentially startups or companies that have that startup mentality. They have that, we want that rapid growth piece. And a big thing for me is exactly as you said, I need to be interested in the solution. So I do truly believe that zero trust as a mindset, as a technical idea, is the best way to protect networks, and it is the best way to protect your machines and your data. So that was a huge piece, but yeah, 100%. The culture itself of having a business where it was very much, we need to get things done. There's a great saying that I like. It's don't ask for permission, ask for don't ask for permission, don't ask to be able to apologize later down the line, or something along those lines. It's basically a go and do it and worry about it later. Yeah. And I really like that. And that has that kind of startup mentality of get it done. We need it done. It needs to be done right now. Go and do it. And that is exactly what I loved the idea about Threatlocker. I mean, outside of that, obviously our CEO, Ben Jenkins, who I need to be very clear, I do not share any relation to. We just ironically are two English guys who have the same surname. I have never met any other Jenkins, but
it's meant to be, right?
Exactly. Outside of that, Danny is brilliant, and he is a huge driving force for why I wanted to join Threatlocker. Seeing how he works technically, seeing his plans for growth, and seeing how much Threatlocker had grown, I knew for me, being involved in that was something that I really needed to do. Yeah,
fantastic. Well, it sounds like, it's a brilliant culture to work in. I like the bit where you talked about, get it done today mentality. It's something that I think many successful companies do, particularly at a startup. At Org3D, we've been a startup. We've got a similar sort of mindset in conducting business like we do, and it's really, really encouraging to have somebody from your technical background also share that sort of belief as well. I guess I wanted to touch upon your relationship with Danny and his plans and your plans as well to grow ThreatLocker. Where do you envisage ThreatLocker being in 3 to 5 years' time? Perhaps maybe sort of is it the same sort of journey that maybe resonated when your time with Datto, or are you guys looking at a slightly different path? And can you just share some ideas as to what's it going to take to get there?
Yeah, sure. So I think the one thing we're aiming for is rapid growth. That is the one thing we have always been aiming for, and it is the one thing that we will continue doing. I think going forwards in 2, 3, 4 years' time, I still hope and I believe that we will still have this startup mentality. A friend of mine works for Amazon, and I was talking to him the other night about it, and he said Amazon is one of the largest startups that still exist because they still have that startup mentality. And I do truly believe that ThreatLocker will continue down that route because it has been so successful for us. As for the future, whether it be acquiring other companies, whether it be going IPO, something on those lines, I think that's going to be very interesting. I wouldn't want to lean towards one or the other, as the plans have changed since I even joined ThreatLocker. So it changes quite rapidly. But I do think that over the coming years, our main goal right now is growth. And that is the one thing that we are focusing on. One thing that we are very, very good at here at ThreatLocker is investing internally. If you go onto our company website, you will see in our careers page, we are always hiring. And half the roles that are on there do not count for even all the roles that we've got open. So one thing that we are constantly trying to invest in is ThreatLocker itself, as well as the IT community, the MSP community as well. But I would say a huge piece of probably where we will end up in 3 to 5 years is a much, much larger company with a lot more employees. We recognize that for us to grow and to scale effectively, we need brilliant people. And that is something that we are definitely focusing on.
Awesome. Well, look, it sounds very, very exciting. I think we talked just before this recording, about your plans as well to grow with the company. It's going to take you to sunnier pastures, I hope.
Here's hoping.
which is very encouraging. I suppose one thing, maybe just to dig into that a little bit, because with every fast-growing company, comes challenges, right? And I suppose you've already been on that journey with Datto in your previous company. What lessons did you learn, or what challenges did you have to face in that role for you to then take this role on and maybe do the same journey again, and maybe not necessarily make the same mistakes, or perhaps face the same challenges slightly differently?
Yeah, sure. So I think that the number one thing I learned is actually a really simple rule, and it's a really simple thing that is very hard to implement, and it does take some time to be able to practice it and get better at it. My other half will tell anyone I'm a very rigid person. I have my structure. 12 o'clock is my lunchtime. At midnight I go to bed. That is, I wake up at 8. I am a very structured person. But and that is great. It works really well. But when you're in a startup mentality, when you're in a startup company, that can also be a bit of an undoing. And that's also part of why I really like being at a startup, because there is no day that it's the same. So I guess the one thing that I had to learn at Datto, and I learned that towards the end, I've been implementing, and it's gone well so far, is learning to think on your feet a lot. And again, it's not something that's as simple as just, I think on my feet a lot more. Like it's not as simple as that. It is definitely a mindset change. It's a way as to how do you cope and how do you deal with the problems of the day that are coming up. So I guess my number one thing that I would recommend to anyone is focusing on, if there is something that you did not expect to be coming through, how is it that you're going to deal with that? How do you break that problem down into my personal way is I will take a large problem, break it down into small problems, and solve those individual pieces one by one. That's how I find the easiest way to break things down and to solve them. So I would definitely say that's been something that has helped me and has helped me through the different companies I've worked at.
Fantastic. I often face the similar dilemmas because I'm a very, very rigid person. I like to be well planned, but obviously in my role, flexibility is something that, I've had to learn as well. And I think me joining Org3D, that was certainly one of the exciting things, because it teaches me to be able to better myself as a person. Yeah. Now, I just wanted to cascade on that. And, I wanted you to talk about, as you continue to grow as a company, you talked a lot about, your hiring plans. You guys are aggressively growing from a headcount point of view. For any person that's got ambitions to maybe join Threatlocker, what would you put one characteristic to any potential employee joining the organization that they need to have on board or might need to be open to when joining Threatlocker? What's the most compelling thing you can say towards that?
What is it you need to be able to join Threatlocker? I guess that's the.
Yeah, what's unique about joining Threatlocker, and what does somebody have to have from a characteristic point of view to be able to be successful within Threatlocker?
Adaptability. Mm-hmm. That's probably, I don't even know if that's a real word, but I may have just made that up. But being able to adapt and change to a rapidly changing environment, is, I would argue, one of our key things. Being able to think on your feet, be able to make a decision with often not always the most amount of information, and being able to adapt to that is the key thing in, I think, any of our roles here at Threatlocker. We are still, as much as I think we're moving out of that startup phase, we are still in that startup mentality. We still definitely have that. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of that has led to us needing to be able to adapt, to be able to do different roles. Have someone move out of support into solutions engineering pretty quick. Have someone move out of solutions engineering into sales because we need a backfill for that, for example. Yeah. So I think the key thing for us at this minute in time is definitely being able to adapt, and kind of improvise to be able to fill the need that there is.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. I just wanted to ask a question. Obviously, I'll be amiss if I didn't ask somebody of your background, your expertise, this question. So, as we're seeing in today's world, there's quite a lot of animosity going on, and there's been so much in the news about cybersecurity impacts, cascading of that. We won't talk in too much detail about that, but in today's world, Ben, what would you highlight as perhaps the biggest challenge the world of cybersecurity faces today?
I would say that the biggest challenge that we face in cybersecurity today is, more than likely, to be honest, the attackers themselves. If we look at the attacks that are going on, they're affecting more of our lives than we necessarily think about. So we think about the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Hopefully that's the politically correct term to use here. The conflict that's going on here. Mm-hmm. Now, that has affected a lot more than just what is happening there. It has affected us from a cybersecurity background as well. We have seen a dramatic rise in attacks going on in EMEA. We've seen a dramatic rise in cybersecurity attacks happening across the US, attacking US businesses. We look at nation-state sponsored groups such as the Conti ransomware gang, who have come out and said that they are going to attack any country from a cybersecurity perspective that is not siding with Russia in this conflict. I think we are going to see a dramatic shift in cybersecurity away from a random business has their data infected or stolen to it is now a much more targeted piece. Based on the ethics and the beliefs of that company or the actions of the companies. Mm-hmm. So, and I think the thing we need to realize as well with cybersecurity is it's going to start affecting us a lot more. Mm-hmm. We always, often 5 years ago, we would think of cybersecurity as, okay, I need to protect my laptop, and that is that at work. Mm-hmm. But cybersecurity, as we become a more technologically involved race of people, as we are integrating technology into our lives in more and more ways, there are more and more ways for threat actors to be able to, frankly, make our lives a living hell. And they will continue to do that because they can make a lot of money from it. Yeah. So I think it's cybersecurity is only going to get more dangerous, but that is also why, and the dangers will increase. And that's I think our biggest threat is actually, I don't like to give them credit, but the threat actors are often very brilliant. They are very smart people. They are very clever people who know how to get through these systems. So our largest threat is always going to be them, but it's now going to be the cat and mouse that we have to play to try and stay that one step ahead for as long as we can.
Yeah, fantastic. I appreciate you sharing that, because I think it's a very, very important topic, and it's one that certainly does excite me. It seems like it's going to be an ever-evolving field. It's always going to be new challenges every single year, every single week. It's constantly evolving, and with the development of technology, I mean, if we think about malware 20 years ago, we had the I love you virus that would send out essentially spam to all of your contacts saying I love you. I always forget the name, but there was a virus that would come up on Windows machines that would essentially say mean things about Bill Gates. It was in relation to some vulnerabilities that were found in Microsoft in the Windows OS, and that's how they were doing that. Like the viruses that we had 20 years ago, they weren't necessarily as malicious as they are now. They were a script kiddie in a basement who was bored. They wanted a little bit of fun. But the viruses that we are seeing over the last 5 years, that we've seen over the last 10, have become a lot more dangerous. We think about CryptoLocker v3 in 2012, 2013, hitting 250,000 machines. We think about WannaCry in, I think it was 2017, hitting over 200,000. We've got the attack on the Irish Health Service that was literally last year. It took down the Irish Health Service, both national and local systems. And when it came to vaccination records, they were doing it through pen and paper. Like, that's absolutely insane. And that was from another cyber attack. They used essentially cold strike beacons to be able to get onto the systems. Now, we're seeing these attacks. They are no longer the I love you virus sending a bit of spam. They are now nation state attacks. They are going after large businesses, but they're also going after small businesses. I think it's about 33% of businesses that are hit with ransomware are under 100 employees. Under 1,000 employees is actually 70% of ransomware attacks are under 1,000 employees, businesses that are hit. So, when we look at these attacks, they are only going to get exponentially worse, and they are getting exponentially worse. And I think we need to make sure that we have cybersecurity solutions in place. And a solution isn't just make sure I have a decent AV, or make sure I've implemented Threatlocker because it's got zero trust behind it. A solution is also policies in place that we need to set. It's internal strategy, it's internal policy, it's internal training. We need to make sure we have a decent cybersecurity background and foundation that we can build upon, so that we no longer have these so we can minimize the attacks that are happening, because they are only going to get exponentially worse. Absolutely. And is there anything maybe you can share with maybe some of our independent listeners out there, maybe just the old Joel blogs around the corner? What could an ordinary person do to protect themselves from such a heightened threat of cyber attack?
Yeah, sure. So, obviously I come from a zero trust background. So my number one way of doing it, and I need to make it very clear, zero trust is a structure. It's a technological structure as such. It's not an individual company. So you can get zero trust solutions out there anywhere in the web, but it's simple things. Remove local admin control from your users. 95% of ransomware attacks that come through are because a user has clicked on something, downloaded something, and then ran that file. That's literally 95% of ransomware actually comes through, technically through email and such. So remove local admin control so they're not able to run certain executables. Implement app whitelisting solutions. Whether it be through Threatlocker or even other solutions as well. There are a multitude of app whitelisting pieces out there. Look at your security as a whole. And I think the key thing there is look at your security as a whole and data as well, and find where your weaknesses are and focus on that. Don't try to cover everything at once. Focus on each individual piece, cover it, move on to the next. The biggest flaw that I have seen with MSPs and with other IT professionals in enterprise pieces is they will spread themselves far too thin, trying to cover because they realize they have 10 points of entry. Take it individually, each point one by one, and you will find that your networks will become a lot more secure, a lot quicker.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, that's really good advice, and appreciate you sharing that, Ben. It's certainly going to be beneficial to our listeners. I guess I've got 2 more points really that I really wanted to finish upon. One of them is, it's a question I'd like to ask somebody who's in a very senior position with a fast-growing company is, if we were to start back all the way back in your career and do it differently or do something differently, is there anything that you would perhaps, do differently, I suppose, way back when you started your career in cybersecurity?
What would I do differently? The thing is, I'm very lucky, and I'm very lucky in the situation I'm in, where I've been very lucky to get to where I am. If I had to do anything differently, I would actually get involved in startups a lot quicker. I find that startup mentality is a mentality that I very much enjoy. It's very much work hard, play hard, and you getting to see these businesses grow from a 10-person thing up to 1,000 people is very rewarding. So I think my one thing would be, if I had to do anything differently, I'd be getting involved in startups a lot earlier than I did.
Yeah, fantastic, awesome. And this is a great question to finish up on. What one piece of advice would you give to somebody who's maybe looking to start their journey in cybersecurity or in the entrepreneurial journey? Is there one piece of advice you would give to maybe somebody who's on that journey, maybe a book to read, a person to follow? What would you say, or who would you say, and why?
Yeah, sure. My one thing is never get stagnant, never sit still for too long, always be trying to better yourself or what it is you're doing. Whether it be you come from a technical background and you have your own home lab that you're running. Always be trying out new solutions. I'm an avid Reddit user, so follow good Reddit subreddits. For the MSP forum, there is r/MSP, there is r/home labs. My key thing, and this is something that I still do to this day, is always try to stay informed and try to learn what is happening out there, the new solutions, the new threats. Just always try to broaden your mind rather than don't ever become complacent.
Yeah, fantastic. Awesome advice. Well, this has been a brilliant podcast, ladies and gentlemen. This has been fantastic. It's been a pleasure having you with us here today, Ben. I'm sure our listeners are going to take so much value from this 30 minutes of recording. And thank you to the listeners at home. Thank you for all your continued support in listening to our podcast channel. And I look forward to you guys tuning in next time. Thank you.
Thank you.